13-day trip, or a holiday as the Europeans like to call it, to Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. This was the first time that Anita had visited these beautiful countries. The majority of the time was spent in Germany, where Anita learned many valuable lessons about the value of preserving history, all the history of a country. Anita is giving project number 10, an 8 to 10 minute speech, Inspire Your Audience. The name of the speech, We Must Learn from Our Past. Please welcome Anita.
Thank you. All countries have a history. Some of it is good, some of it is bad, and some of it is downright ugly. In fact, we could even use a stronger word than ugly. Some of it is horrific. If we do not remember our history, especially our bad history, we are doomed to repeat it. One of the reasons I went to Germany was that I knew we were going to visit one of the concentration camps, Dachau. And I believe that Germany does an excellent job in remembering their history. I also believe the United States does an excellent job. When we pulled up at the gate of Dachau, it was our second day in Germany. Our guide, Matthew, is a 40-year-old German native, and he gave us a very short but moving speech. And he said, I am a German. I am very proud to be a German, but I am very, very troubled by our history, especially from 1933 to 1944, when our duly elected Chancellor, Hitler, established concentration camps and put over 6 million Jews to death, as well as gypsies, homosexuals, and any other person that challenged the government. This is inexcusable. In fact, it is horrible. We as Germans own this history. We face it, we confront it, we are embarrassed by it, and we have learned from it. It will never happen again. We then exited the bus and we walked through the gates, and it is a large facility, Dachau, and it is probably 3 football fields large. And as I walked through there, I recalled again something that Matthew had said. And he said, all our children who go through our educational system are required to visit a concentration camp before they leave our educational system. And as I'm walking through, the first building I see is the museum. And I walk in it, and I see these pictures that I have seen 100 times, and all of us have seen, of these prisoners staring at me with their hollowed eyes, their sunken cheeks, and their clothes, which are not clothes but rags, hanging from their bodies that are like walking skeletons. I continue walking through, and the next room is the dormitory, in which it's a huge room, and there are 3-decker bunk beds in which people were required to sleep in those and had to sleep on their side because of the lack of space. The next room I walk into is the shower room, the place where we are supposed to have water come from the ceiling out of the spigots and be enriched, cleansed, refreshed. And we know that that did not oftentimes happen, but rather poisonous gas came out of those spigots. And as I stand there, I just, it's like sacred ground. People stood here and were killed. Thousands, millions of people were killed at this very spot that I'm standing at. Moving from that area, we went outside And about half a block away is a small brick building, which is the crematorium. And this is where, as you walk in this brick building, there are ovens. In fact, there are 2 ovens. And in those ovens, they would put 4 dead bodies, ragged bodies that had been killed, toss them in, and exterminate them, cremate them. And as I walked out of the building, I looked up at the roof and saw the chimneys and thought, how tragic. The ashes that came out of that chimney, ashes that formerly were human beings, and killed because they were not, as Hitler liked to say, of the superior race, the Aryan race. As I walked back to the bus, almost numb and hardly able to move one foot in front of the other, I looked at the side, and there's a huge sign, and it's written in several languages, and it was 2 words. And the third words down were the English words, "Never again. Never again should this happen." When we boarded the bus and went back to Munich, which was about 10 miles away, there was total silence. None of us could quite say anything about this horrendous experience that we had just gone through. I also believe that the United States recalls its history and recalls it well. We could talk about some of the terrible things of American history, and unfortunately they are plentiful. We could talk about our slavery history, which started in 1619 and went to 1865. We could talk about our treatment of the American Indians, the Trail of Tears. But what I want to talk about very briefly is the containment camps that we created during World War II, the Japanese American internment camps. And we too, the Americans, have preserved those camps. We have not bulldozed them over, put shopping centers there so that we never recall this history. 120,000 Japanese Americans were forced into these camps. And they were forced into them by an executive order of Franklin Roosevelt, 1966, in 1942. And they were put there as a reaction, an overreaction to Pearl Harbor. Of these 120,000 Japanese Americans, over 2/3 of them were American citizens. But because they had Japanese ancestor and our fear, we put them in these camps, and we gave the reason because of security. We were afraid they would become spies and communicate to Japan what was going on in the United States. In that history, there were 10 spies that were arrested and convicted, and none of them were Japanese Americans. This history is very troubling, but the fact that we remember it, and we face it, and we confront it, and we learn from it, speaks well of us. One of the things that I have read, and I think is so powerful, and it was talking about the concentration camps of Germany, and could also apply to our camps during the World War II, is that if it happened, it can happen again. This is the essence of why we must remember our history. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita, for helping us remember the dark parts of our history.